So a quick recap on the 8 days of hell. It started on February the 25th, 1756. The attack started in Big Cove, Little Cove, and then eventually in the Conococheague Settlement down in Maryland around Hancock area today. Then it moved up into the Little Cove at the attack of Fort Davis, which occurred on February the 29th, 1756. And then the Indians were moving into the area of the Conococheague Settlement on that day and evening. So February the 29th, 1756, Fort Davis was attacked. Word got to Peters Township, which is where we are standing at today. Actually, I am on the property of Peters Township Sewer Authority, just next to the Conococheague Creek, which we'll get into in a minute here. But on February the 29th, 1756, Fort Davis was attacked. 46 men were dispatched from Peters Township from Fort McDowell, which was the head military outpost in the area, which Fort McDowell is just down stream from us and on the other side of the creek, the Conococheague Creek. Those 46 men went to the Little Cove to track down the Indians that attacked Fort Davis. Now, that was on the early morning of March the 1st, 1756, but on February the 29th, 1756 in the evening, there was a young man named Alexander. He was actually on his way to Path Valley, which is heading north from this position. He ran into a force of Indians and were located not that far from us here, actually to our west, at a place called Thomas Barr's. It was his farm. Actually, they were in his orchard. And upon spotting the Indians, this Alexander, a young man, took off on a dead run to warn Fort McDowell of the Indians not that far away from their doorstep. When he took on his run, he actually ran down Walker Run, which is just over on this side of the sewer authority, which you'll see right over here. And he ran down that run with 3 Indians on his tail. Now, in order to escape the Indians, the problem was he had to get to Fort McDowell and cross the creek. The problem with that is that will slow your run, and the Indians will catch up to you and most likely kill you at the creek. So he decided, knowing the terrain, to make a left-hand turn from Walker Run. And that is how he wound up where I'm standing at, or roughly where I'm standing at here. And he comes to this cliff. If you look below here, which hopefully you can see, this is this Conococheague Creek, and it makes a big turn here, right here at this cliff. Now, somewhere along this cliff, Alexander arrived, and then he leaped off of the cliff to escape the 3 pursuing Indians. Somehow he cleared the creek. At least that's what the story says. Now, most likely he probably hit the tops of the trees and he went down on the other side, breaking his fall and not breaking his legs. He did make it on the other side of the creek, and he went to Fort McDowell, which is located downstream on the other side of the creek from where I'm standing here, and warned them of the Indians at Thomas Barr's. The 3 Indians that were in pursuit apparently were not dumb enough to leap off of this cliff, so they did not follow him. So now I am at what is called the Widow Barr Place. Now, the reason why it's called the Widow Barr Place is because at the time of the second battle that occurred here, there's actually 2 battles that occurred in this location. One in 1756, which is the one we're going to talk about, and then one in 1765. The one in 1765 is the most famous one because it was a engagement between the British regulars of Fort Loudon and the colonists. The reason why it's called the Widow Barr Place was because this was where the widow Barr lived during the 1765 engagement between the British regulars and the colonists during the Black Boys Rebellion, which hopefully someday I'll make a video on that one. But it was called the Widow Barr Place because that was what it was called then. But in 1756, it was actually called Thomas Barr's because Thomas Barr was still alive at the time and his wife was not widowed. Anyway, this here is the Widow Barr Place. Actually, behind me is what is called the Widow Barr Place. This house is actually not old enough to be the original Widow Barr Place. This is a lot newer, as it's stone. But this used to be what was called Thomas Barr's farm. Thomas Barr would have owned this farm right here, and this is where Alexander seen the Indians camped at. They were camped here on this farm somewhere, actually in his orchard, which might have been somewhere behind me here. And if that little indent right there, that's Walker Run. That's where Alexander would have ran up to so he can get to the cliff and jump over the cliff while he was being chased by the Indians. Now, before daylight on March 1st, 1756, 14 provincial troops and 12 militia who came from Fort McDowell, which is not all that far away from here, under the advisement of young Alexander, who escaped. Now, he went and warned McDowell's fort, and they sent these 14 provincial troops and the 12 militia off to spy on the Indians that were encamped here, most likely next to the run in the lower regions, because that's where Indians usually camped. Upon coming here, before daylight, of course, they spied 50 Indians. Figuring that they couldn't take on that force, they sent back to Fort McDowell for reinforcements. The provincial soldiers, though, did not want to wait, so they decided that they were going to attack the Indians. And by doing so, or the surprise attack that they planned, was they were going to position themselves most likely somewhere on this hill, and then they were going to attack the Indians, who were most likely down here. Again, we don't know for certain, but that is a good assessment. Now, he wanted the militia to actually run around the back of the Indians and attack them from the back so they can get the Indians in a crossfire, which is a good military strategy. The problem was the militia wasn't in place yet when the provincials fired upon the Indians. When they fired on the Indians, there was not a crossfire because the militia was not in position yet, and the Indians assaulted the soldiers' position, which again most likely was somewhere in here. Not exactly sure, but somewhere in here is where this battle would have occurred. Now, when they assaulted the soldiers' positions, they fired upon them, and the soldiers had to retreat. The initial attack on the Indians dropped several Indians. The attack by the Indians onto the provincial forces actually killed one soldier. The militia, not being quite in position yet, but behind the Indians nonetheless, heard the gunshots and came to the rescue of the provincial soldiers. When they came upon the Indians, they fired upon the Indians, and who now held this position of where the provincial soldiers were. They fired upon the Indians, killing several. The Indians returned fire. They wounded a Mr. Thomas Barr Jr., who's most likely the son of Thomas Barr, who owned the property here in which the battle was occurring. And an Indian actually ran up on Barr with a tomahawk to finish him off. But a young man named Armstrong killed that Indian before he could kill Thomas Barr Jr. The militia, now on the run because the Indians hit them hard, they had to retreat back to Fort McDowell heading that way, and they met up with the reinforcements that they requested earlier. So with the reinforcements, the militia and the provincial forces came back here to finish the Indians off, or at least engage them again. The problem was the Indians weren't here. So the question was, where did they go? So where did the Indians go? Well, they crossed the creek and headed towards Fort McDowell. That was their end game anyway with the 8 days of hell. They were trying to attack Fort McDowell, the main headquarters of this area for the provincial forces and the militia. And here we are again at Fort McDowell. If you recognize this sign and this rock behind me here, I was actually here for the beginning of the French and Indian War video that I did not all that long ago, about a month or two ago. But this is actually where Bird Road started, and again it was the military center for this area when it came to the French and Indian War and the defense of the area with provincial forces and the militia against Indian attacks in the area. So that was the end goal. The end goal of the Indians of all of this, attacking the Conococheague, attacking the Little Cove, attacking Fort David Davis, luring the people away from here. The end goal was to take Fort McDowell. That was what the Indians were trying to do. That was what they were trying to accomplish. So when the militia and the reinforcements all made it back to made it to Thomas Barr's, and the Indians weren't there, well, where were they at? They crossed the creek and they were coming here to attack the Fort McDowell. So when they crossed the creek, they ran into two German boys. The two German boys were chased by three Indians, very similar to that poor Alexander, but Alexander at least got away. The two German boys, one got killed, the other one, he did make it to the fort and warned them of the attack of the Indians. Within 10 minutes of this warning, the fort was surrounded by the Indians, and they were all hiding in thickets all around the fort. Shots rang out from both the thickets and the fort as they were exchanging gunfire right here at this fort, right here at this intersection in Marks that I'm standing at today. Two men coming towards the mill. They were found in the middle of the fight when everything when all the shots started to ring out. Both made it to the fort. However, they were all being shot at the entire time. Luckily, they were able to make it. The men at Thomas Barr's, of course, the reinforcements, the militia, the provincial forces that had to retreat from the initial battle at Thomas Barr's, they heard the gunshots here, and of course they had to come to the aid of Fort McDowell. So they rushed across the creek as fast as they could, and they came here. Now, as Fort McDowell was being besieged by these Indians in the thickets, the men from the militia showed up, and they were able to beat the Indians back into the thickets and away from the fort. Then, lo and behold, 5 men from Mr. Adam Hoops's group, they came in riding horses, and they came up to the fort. They were fired on by the Indians, wounding 1 man on his horse in the belly and killing and scalping another. The Indians were victorious there. The Indians retreated back to Thomas Barr's after they were unsuccessful of taking this fort. Luckily, the fort had enough men here to help defend it, even though they sent 46 men to help track down the Indians at Fort David Davis. But the Indians were able to retreat. They were they were unsuccessful at taking the fort, and they retreated back to Thomas Barr's, which is where I was just at. While there, they actually burnt down Barr's house after they put their dead in it, and they eventually burnt the house down and disposed of their dead. Now, the provincial government soldiers, the militia, the reinforcements, and everybody that was here at Fort McDowell, they were kind of in the middle of waiting on command. So they were waiting on the higher-ups to tell them what they should do, because they got attacked by Indians. They had a lot of their men out hunting Indians in the little cove, and they didn't know exactly what to do. So because they were waiting on a command, and also because the snow began to fall very heavy that day, or that evening, they did not pursue the Indians, and they decided to stay here, and the Indians, of course, got away. Now, out of all of this attack on Fort McDowell and the battle at Thomas Barr's, out of the settlers' force, there were 3 men killed and 3 men wounded.